guys, Bound to Divide here with Ableton Tips, and today we're going to be making 3 basses from Afterlife artists. The first one's Anyma Walking, and it sounds like this. Then we've got Colyn and Innellea, Obnoxious Desire. And then lastly, Argy, Magic Order. Okay, so the first one is Anyma Walking, and let's just have a look at this. So a lot of what the sound does has to do with automating certain parameters. Here you can see there's lots of stuff that I've automated. So we're going to remake it together, but I'm going to just duplicate this bass channel here. I'm going to turn off the effects chain, and I'm going to reload wavetables so that we're starting up together. And I'm going to be toggling back and forth between these two basses to double check the parameters. There's just too many parameters and things for me to remember, so I'm going to just be tabbing between these two while we remake it. So when you think about sounds like this, a lot of it has to do with automation and then a lot of distortion and filtering to get the sound, because at its core it's really just a saw wave and a sine wave, which on their own with that and a filter sound pretty boring. But when you start driving loads of distortion into it, that's where you start getting this like really dirty, powerful sound. And then after that, it's about adding effects and giving it a space to make it seem bigger than it actually is. Okay, so first oscillator is a sine wave, and our second oscillator, we're going to turn that on and make that a saw wave. Let's just double check that. Saw wave, yeah. And they're at the same octave, so just like that. Oh, and you might also want to just copy down this MIDI over here. So yeah, with nothing on it, these two waveforms together, they just sound like this. And then what we want to do is we want to enable this filter, so we want to bring down this frequency here, and that frequency was at 171 Hertz. So just make that 171. Now you can hear it's like kind of dark. And we want to bring the resonance up to 18%. And here we want to switch this to our 24 dB filter. So just click on that button there. And then we want to enable PRD, which is like a Moog filter as far as I know. Yeah, so you can see it's a different circuit. If you hover over here, you can read exactly what it does. That PRD is a ladder circuit, and as far as I know, the ladder filter comes from a Moog. But the reason why I've enabled this is so that we can start playing with this drive, and that's where most of the grit of the sound comes from. If we have a listen to the original here, you can see I've got a saturate on here, but actually most of the drive is coming from the filter. Without the drive, it's a completely different sound. So that drive is hugely important for sounds like this. So let's just bring up this drive all the way up to 24, and then we want to bring down the output volume here to -10. Okay, I think that's it for the filter. There's going to be a bunch of filter automation that we're going to do, but I'll leave that to the end. For now, let's just keep going here. So next up, we've got our amp envelope, and so if we just go to amp here, and we want to copy down these parameters here. We've got an attack of 14 milliseconds, decay of 1.25. So here, attack 14, yeah, decay 1. I think it's 1250. There we go. And sustain -12. And I think the release, I didn't touch the release. And then we go into envelope 2, and envelope 2 is going to be, if we go into the matrix here, we can see envelope 2 is modulating the filter frequency. So what we need to do here is we need to go to the matrix here, and we just need to click on frequency. And then we can start modulating the frequency here with envelope 2. And the amount of modulation is exactly 42. So yeah, I got lucky there. So now we can really hear those harmonics come through from the drive. It's getting nice and gritty. And the shape of the envelope is super important here. Let's just go back to the beginning of the clip because it's being automated. But the decay starts at 1, 584, and 54. So 584, sustain of 54, and then our release is 546. And oh wait, envelope 2 Oh, sorry, it's because of the automation that it looks different now. So we're basically just focusing on the beginning here. Okay, so what else have we got? We've got envelope 3, which is modulating the pitch. So if we just go down here into envelope 3, go to the matrix here, we can go and modulate pitch, and the pitch amount, I think it was, yeah, 21.8. So the point of this is to basically create a little bit of an attack for the sound. We want a very fast decay in pitch, kind of like how a kick drum gets its punch. So we can just do that. And then the shape of that envelope, we've got 1. So here's 35 milliseconds. We got 0 sustain. And the release doesn't matter. So yeah, to basically hear that, we could exaggerate what it's doing. If I turn it off, just pay attention to the start of the sound. It starts getting this like punch as I turn it up. Gives it this really nice strong attack. So yeah, I'll just leave it around there. It's not super important if it's 21 or 22. It's more important about the shape of the envelope. And if it's too long, the decay, you start getting this like 808 kick drum kind of sound. Okay, and we need to make sure that it's in mono because we don't want any notes overlapping and it'll just sound horrible. So just set it to mono. Yeah, and then the most important part here, or one of the most important parts, is all of the automation. So here you can see I'm automating a bunch of parameters. The first one is the filter frequency. So I'm just going to re-enable these automations as I explain them. But basically, first automation is going to be controlling this frequency amount. So it's going to be opening up just on these 2 hits. And then the last one is a bit louder than this section. So we have this feeling of it growing through there. So I'm going to just re-enable that automation. But if you want to do that automation yourself, all you do is just click on that button, make sure that you're in automation mode, and then you can create points and click and drag them. So we start at 171 and then go up to 283 here. And if you want to know how to basically make these perfect flat lines, you can just highlight a section and these little boxes pop up and you can drag them up. So then it goes up to 283 and then we're modulating it up again, automating it up to 496. So if you compare this hit to this one, that one's even louder, and this one, I mean even brighter, that one's even brighter, and then this one is brighter than that one. The note lengths are also important. If I didn't mention that at the start, you want to have like a long and a short note, long and a short note. And the size of this grid is 16ths. So this one's 4/16 and this one's 2/16. Okay, then the next thing that we are automating is the global modulation amount. So that's this amount here. And what that's going to be doing is basically taking these parameters like filter frequency and pitch. And it's going to be, if at 100%, this is 22.5. If I bring that down to like 50%, then it'll be half of that amount. So I'm just going to re-enable that. And here you can see how basically we start with this modulation amount at 43%. So it's about half of this amount here. So here it sounds a bit darker. And then as I increase the amount, you'll hear the sound get brighter because this filter frequency is opening up and the sound also gets punchier. So this note is not as powerful as that one. And here we're just basically copying these all the way across. There's no change over time. So the first note is at 43%, the second note at 73%, and then it just continues to alternate between them. Okay, and then the third thing that we're automating is filter resonance. So in the original, I noticed that the sound had like this resonant, almost like drop on certain notes, and on others it wasn't as obvious. So I try to kind of emulate that by increasing and decreasing the resonance. So I'm just going to re-enable that automation here. And when you have a resonant peak and you drive it through a filter like this really hard, it kind of loses that resonant peak. It like clips it off and then creates harmonics. So if you turn up the resonance while you have drive and you're like getting frustrated because you can't hear resonance, the reason is because those resonant peaks are being clipped by the filter, but you can still kind of hear them. It at least changes like the quality of the sound. So here the resonance is at 39%, and then it goes at 76%, and then down to 18%, 76, 18, 76, and then it sounds like this. And you'll hear without the drive, you'll really hear that resonance. starts becoming like an acid kind of bass. Okay, then the next thing is the wavetable envelope to decay. So here, this decay amount. So the sound the first note is kind of like long and the second one is a bit shorter. And we control that by automating this decay. So it's at 584, and then when this note hits, it's around 180 milliseconds. And then we're also playing with the release here. I'm going to re-enable automation. And the release is at 546 and then 145, just so that, you know, this note ends a lot more abruptly than this one. Kind of really want to have this like, and then it's like push and pull kind of feeling. And then we've got the sustain here, and the sustain is kind of working together with the decay to make the sound a lot shorter and snappier on the second note. So the decay is at 54% here, and then down to 22%. Now you can just watch the shape of this and see what's happening with the sound. Okay, so that's it pretty much for everything in this synth, and you can see you get pretty far without any external effects. But now we want to kind of really just spice up the sound, EQ it a bit, and then put it into space with delay and some reverb, and then sidechain it to the kick drum. So I'm going to turn this on and then just go through the effects one by one. Okay, so first up is the saturator, and what I did with the saturator is just increase the drive by 12 dB and decrease the output by -4. And we are using a wave shaper here. By default it's on analog clip, and that I just didn't like the sound of that one. Wave shaper sounds better to me. In this case, you just have to kind of get lucky with this, so just try them all out and see which one sounds the nicest. That's how I do it, at least. And then I decreased the bass here, and this bass amount just basically tells the saturator how much of the lower frequencies do you want to push through the saturator. So if you increase this bass, you'll get this like really strong distortion, because it's like hammering those lower frequencies. If you decrease it, it becomes almost like unnoticeable. So I just had it, I think, at like -2, yeah, -2.2. And then I used EQA to just bring up the sub a bit, and then bring up this frequency here to 25 Hertz. And then delay. So the delay is really important in the original. Like, I really had to pay attention to hearing at like the timing of the delay. So here you can see I've unlinked them, and this one's set to 4 and this one's set to 3. So they're kind of like landing at different times, but it creates like this rhythmic kind of like bounce to the bass. And then if you drag this filter down to 432 and the width to 1.73, so we're only really getting the delays in the mid-range. We don't want like a bunch of high-end or sub in the delay. And then the mix is at 25%. And then this utility was kind of to just bring down the width of that delay. And that's just because in the original, the delay was kind of a bit more pulled in. It wasn't super wide like this. It wasn't like 100% width. It was, yeah, it just felt a bit more centered. And then I brought down the gain a little bit too. I just felt like the signal was coming through a bit hot. And then a little bit more saturation. I just used this preset warm-up highs. That just adds like a little bit of bite to the sound. And then some reverb, and that just makes the sound feel bigger, puts it in this like huge space. So how the reverb is set up is this input filter is brought down to 272 Hertz with width of 2.98. I don't think I touched the pre-delay. The size is still at 100. Decay time at 2.41, and then 23% mixed in here on the dry wet. And then this glue compressor is there to kind of just bring out the transient a little bit more of the sound. So you can hear it clamping down on the sound, but the initial transient comes through, so it gives like the illusion that the sound is hitting harder. And how you achieve that is by having a long attack. So if I had to exaggerate this by bringing the threshold down, you can hear that an initial sound comes through, but the rest, the tail, doesn't. So it basically makes the transient feel a bit stronger. You can make that even longer, the attack, for more effect. And then bring the threshold up till it's doing about -5. So without the compressor, with, yeah, you're getting a lot more punch in the sound. And the release is here at 0.6. Soft clippings turn on, and you'll see that the sound actually does clip a bit. So it's adding a little bit more drive to it, a bit more grit. And then the makeup gain's at 2.2. And then this is just to sidechain it to the kick. And yeah, I just pulled the kick from the original track. I'm not going to show you how to do that. That's not really part of this tutorial. But yeah, all together with the kick and the clap, we have this.
Just a quick break before we go back to the tutorial. If you find these type of videos helpful, we can highly recommend the PML Academy with over 35 full-length online courses, spreading over topics like writing chords and melodies or arranging your songs to producing entire songs from start to finish. So check out the link in the description to see what's inside the All Courses bundle exactly.
Okay, so the next sound is Colyn and Innellea Obnoxious Desire. And this sound took me ages to figure out. I kind of tried to do it initially with Wavetable, and I tried with Analog, and then I figured layering them together kind of got me most of the way there. But again, it's about creating a nice, interesting sound and then putting it into a space and distorting it and stuff. So here you can see it's 2 layers. First layer is Analog, second layer is Wavetable, and Analog is kind of giving it this initial punch of the sound, and Wavetable is giving this like mid-range character to it. So yeah, let's just duplicate Analog and then we'll rebuild Analog together. And let me just delete this overdrive because I'm not even using it. And I'm gonna group all of this processing and just turn it off. Okay, so this is the MIDI, and here you can see it's basically just 1/8 notes, and then we have these 32 30-second notes over here that just kind of flam. Initially I thought maybe he was doing it with an LFO, which is still possible, but with Analog it didn't sound right to use an LFO. So I got the best result just from using the envelopes and sequencing out the MIDI like this. Okay, so let me just reload Analog. Alright, so if we have a look at the synth, we have 2 oscillators. They are both square waves. So let's just set them both to square waves. And at the moment that sounds like this. And we've got a little bit of a pitch attack, again, to like just give it a little bit of punch. So here, if you just click on these oscillators, you'll be able to set the pitch. So here it's around 50% with a time of about 5% on both of them. It doesn't have to be exact, it's just to create a little bit of punch. So I'm just going to set that to 50, that to 5, and the same thing on this one, 55. And then we want to bring down the second oscillator by 2.4 dB and pitch it up 1 octave. It's 2.4, so it's a little bit quieter and it's higher up. Okay, and then we also have a noise oscillator, and the noise is set to -5, and it goes through this signal chain. So it's going to filter 2, but filter 2 is actually turned off, but then it comes out of this second amplifier, so we can control the filter with the second amplifier. So just set that to -5 here, and then send it through filter 2, and we need to turn on amp 2, otherwise we won't hear the noise. And then the noise, we also have to make it brighter. Set it to 3.8. Oops, 3,800. Now you can hear that noise. And then we're going to begin shaping the sound to make it nice and short and plucky. So let's first have a look at this filter. And the filter is set down to 211 Hertz. And then we're modulating it up by 6.5. So let's just go down here and set the filter down to 225 and this envelope amount to 6.5. And I'm going to turn off the noise now because it's a bit distracting. We'll turn it back on when we begin to shape it. So now we can hear it's like nice and plucky with this filter, but now we need to change the shape of the filter. And we got the attack at 5 milliseconds, decay at 249, and sustain pretty much all the way down. So 5 and 249, 249. Okay, there we go, and the sustain all the way down. So now we got that nice punchy sound. And just while we're here, we might want to just set it to mono. So you can click on this tab here and go to mono. Then I think I set the drive here to a different model here, to Sim 3. So if I just change this to Sim 3, you'll hear it has more of a grit to it. Okay, and then we want to go up here to this amp envelope and shape the sound a bit more. So the decay and sustain, decay is at 835 and sustain's pretty much at 0. Here on amp envelope, 845. There we go, 0.845, sustain at 0. And then release, I think I need to bring down the release. Yeah, the release is at 48 milliseconds because you can hear it has this like long tail, 0.048. And now that release is gone, so the sound's not like ringing out as much anymore. And now we can shape that noise. So we're going to turn on the noise, and because it's flowing through this signal chain, it's not going to be shaped by this amp envelope, and you're going to just have this really long noise. So we need to have a look at this envelope and see how it's been shaped. So the attack's at 58 milliseconds, so the sound's going to kind of like fade in a little bit after the attack of the oscillators happens. So it's going to get out of the way of those. And then decay's at 206 and sustain at 0. So if I just turn this on, you'll hear it's kind of just sustained noise. We want to bring it up like 50 milliseconds. And then the decay down. Oops, I'm working with the wrong amp envelope here. Bring those back. So sustain down. Okay, so that sounds about right, I think. 265, 206, 206, sorry. 0.206. Okay, so that's it pretty much for the synth. Next we're going into the effects. So let me just turn this on, turn all of this stuff off. So this kind of drove me insane trying to figure out. I didn't get the space sounding exactly the same as the original, but I think it still sounds cool, so whatever. We've got a glue compressor, and that's doing the same thing as before. We've got a really short release and a longer attack to kind of bring out that transient. It's kind of like spanking the sound, and you can really notice it if you focus more on the body of the sound, so like the tail, and you can hear what it's doing to the tail with the noise. It's kind of like pushing it down and bring it back up, and it just gives it a bit more character and makes it sound nicer, I think. And then it's soft clipping it, and we're going into a saturator with 4 dB of drive. It's left on analog clip. Nothing else has really changed, and then the output's just brought down by 4 dB. Let's just check, because I think maybe it's too loud. No, it's not, because that sounds pretty squashed by this. Oh, there we go. The problem here was that the amp envelope 2 is too loud, so the noise is too loud, and it's distorting with the saturator. So I think we need to bring it down to minus 33. There we go. So now the noise is a bit quieter. And then you don't hear that noise distorting with the oscillators as much. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to this hybrid reverb, and I'm using this convolution reverb only. So we bring this blend down all the way to the left, then we're only hearing the convolution reverb. And the preset I chose here was under halls, digital long haul, but then I brought down the decay to 1.45 seconds. If I turn this up, you'll hear what it's doing. It's kind of giving it this cool, almost like delay slash reverb. And then here in the EQ, I just EQ'd it like this, just to take out some of the sub. If I turn this off, it's just too much. So I took out some of the subs, some of the mids, and some of the highs. And then we're going into a delay here, and these are kind of displaced to the left and the right by 1.6% so that it becomes a bit wider, because without that it sounds very mono. This pushes it out to the sides, and then the filter's just brought down to 805 Hz with the width of 1.62 and the dry weight at 24%. And then some reverb to put it into space. Okay, so yeah, next up we need to do this wavetable, and this is quite an easy one. This was just to kind of get that character of the mid-range. Make it sound a bit more interesting than just two square waves. So I'm going to duplicate this and wavetable here. Okay, so I've just basically went through a bunch of different wavetables here and found one that sounded as close as possible to the original sound. Now I found this sync additive waveform here, which sounds like this. So it's not a pretty sound, but we're going to shape it and make it sound a lot better. Okay, so the position of the waveform is down at the bottom here. That's fine. That's how it is originally. And we need to add a sub to it at the same octave, so at octave 0. So just turn that on, set it to octave 0. It's just basically adding a... Oh wait, let's just turn off that EQ. There we go, now you can hear the sub. Just gave it a bit more power, but I'm filtering it out afterwards, so maybe it didn't even make sense that I did that. But hey, I'm going to do that because it might affect the way this sound distorts through the filter, so it's better to just leave it on. And then we look at this frequency here of the filter. Well, first of all, we're setting this to a 24 dB filter, PRD mode, and then the drive all the way up. So 24 PRD, and then the drive all the way up. And then we want the frequency at 152 and resonance at 40. 52 and resonance at 40. And now we're only hearing the sub, so we need to modulate this filter. And what we're using for that is envelope 3 I'm using. So let's just make envelope 3 the same shape, 152, sustain at 50, and then the release at 9.32. And we won't hear that doing anything at the moment because we're not actually modulating anything. We need to click on frequency, go to the matrix here, start to increase that. Okay, and the amount of that is at 48. Okay, and then we also need to set up this amp envelope to 294 and minus infinity. 294, and then all the way down. And we can bring the release down to match mine, but it doesn't make a difference to the sound, so it doesn't really matter. And then the sound is a mono sound. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, nothing else is being modulated. It's a really simple sound, but it just gives it that nice mid-range. And then all I'm doing is just taking out the sub. And then if we solo these together, and we start getting this, the layers just work together really nicely. Then there's some processing over here on the group, because I've grouped them together, and that's an EQ8. Which actually makes quite a bit of a difference to the sound. So I'm taking out some of this around 1K, like minus 6 dB of it, or minus 7.8, and then the Q's at 0.71. And if we just A/B between that, it really cleans up that horrible like nasal characteristic of it. And then I'm boosting the sub just a little bit, and then taking out a tiny bit of the highs. And then sidechaining it to the kick drum. Okay, the last sound. This one's a much easier one, a lot more simple, but it's still really effective. Okay, so this is a wavetable sound, and I'm just going to turn off all of the processing here. And we're basically just making a nice plucky saw wave. Got 2 saw waves here. And then again, just driving it and putting it through delay and some reverb, putting it into a space really. So let me just duplicate this sound here and then reload Wavetable. Okay, so it sounds like this. We're going to bring it up to the saw. But I didn't use this exact saw. I pushed it up a bit. I just felt like a slight combination between a square and a saw sounded a bit better. So what exact number did I have it on? 69%. Might not notice a huge difference now, but when you start filtering it, changing this ever so slightly completely changes like the character of the sound. And then our second oscillator is 66%, but the volume's all the way down, -11. So this one's at 66, and then this is at -11. Yeah, I'm not really sure that's doing much to the sound, but I thought, I mean, I obviously did it for some reason. Not sure why. Maybe it adds like a little bit more thickness to it or something. And then we're going into the filter here, and the filter is again 24 PRD, the drive at 8.81. So 24 PRD, the drive at 8.81. And that's getting pretty loud now, so we need to start filtering it down. So the frequency is at 1.62 and resonance at 23. Sorry, 162 and 23. 162 and 23. Okay, so now we need to start modulating the filter to just make it into a nice plucky shape. So envelope 2, we bring down the decay to 150 and sustain to 23. And then we use that to modulate frequency to 48. So here we can just go to the matrix and click on frequency and push it to 48. And we want to make it a mono sound and set the output to -11. So there we go, we have this nice short tight sound. And the amp envelope, we probably have to change that too. Yeah, 307 and -30. 307 and -30. So now the sound isn't as like boomy and long. And we don't have a sub or anything on there, no. Okay, so next up we're going into an overdrive. And this is overdrive at its default state. It's super strong distortion. So I brought down the drive to 8% and then filtered it down to 368 Hertz with a 2.27 bandwidth here. And then brought down the tone also to 21% and the dry wet to 16%. So you can hear it's adding a bit of drive still, but it's not too hectic. It's more like almost like a saturation. And then this EQ is just bringing out some mid-range. And a little bit of the smack here at 3 kilohertz. So this one's at 400 hertz. This one's at 3 kilohertz. And we're just boosting those up a bit. And then the delay. Again, this is set to 1. And then we taking the left and the right and kind of unsyncing them a bit to make the sound nice and wide. So 2.6% here. And then the filter you want it at 1.2 and width at 0.72. And then the dry wet at 19%. And then this hybrid reverb, again, all the way to the left. And here I'm using this chamber and large rooms Ableton Canteen. That puts it into a nice space. You just got to filter out the low end and the high end. Low end went to 208 and high end to 1.4. The dry wet at 28%. And then some compression to just sidechain it to the kick drum. And there we go, that's the sound. So a nice simple one, but still sounds really effective. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and you learnt a lot, and thanks for watching. If you want to take a deeper dive into more sound design stuff or any other courses, we have a bunch linked below. So yeah, go and check them out. Alright, have a good day and I'll see you at the next one.